All right. Good morning, Doug. We're here with a Q&A session. Thank you, everybody, for submitting questions. The best way to submit questions is join our Telegram channel, where I periodically ask for submissions, and you send them there, and then we get through as many of them as we can in these discussions. So first, Doug, I want to talk to you. This is the 4th of July weekend. So I'm just curious, I don't know, how do you handle 4th of July? What do you think about 4th of July? What's your routine on the holiday?
Yeah, well, that can be a complex question. What do I think about the 4th of July? I've asked myself in the past, because it's my custom to try to question everything. And the basic question about the 4th of July is, should the 13 colonies have actually declared independence from Britain? Was that actually a good idea? I mean, we can build arguments that it wasn't, because sure, they were complaining about relatively minor and nuisance taxes, the Stamp Act and whatnot, but we're talking about the Crown taking 1 or 2% or 3% of revenues, and not for many people. So maybe it would have been better if we'd stayed, kind of a distant colony. Anyway, that's the first thing. I have no strong feelings about that. But the 4th of July as it is, well, first of all, the Declaration of Independence, which is what the 4th of July is really about, is the founding document of the United States, not so much the Constitution, it's the Declaration of Independence. And it's a very radical document. I don't think 1 out of 100 Americans have read it, because if they did read the Declaration of Independence, they'd be absolutely shocked. It's a radical document. And if they read it with an eye to what's going on in the country today, they'd be double shocked. So other than that, 4th of July, you can't even set off fireworks, except for sparklers or those little snakes or stuff like that. So this shows how controlled Americans are. I mean, God forbid you fire a gun on the 4th of July, they'll call a SWAT team in on you. So the whole thing the idea of the thing is degraded at this point.
Has degraded, unfortunately. And I think that the idea of it, I like it a lot because of the radical nature of the Declaration of Independence. I mean, I like that radical type thinking, believing that an individual really matters and they should not be subjugated to another. Like, that's a great idea. I love that.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's become the holiday, of course, like all holidays, they end up becoming more associated with the accoutrements of the holiday than the underlying meaning of the holiday. And I think fireworks was, is certainly one of those accoutrements that's there, and is kind of the main theme now of 4th of July. And last year, one of the things that really made me happy about last year's 4th of July, though, was that basically every municipality in the country said no fireworks. We had to stay inside, social distance, whatever. And then you saw these places where, people were putting on fireworks shows in their backyards. They had like this helicopter flying over LA, and mostly in these Latino neighborhoods, and it is the best fireworks show I've ever seen from this helicopter visual. And I loved the people. Basically, it was what the 4th of July is really about, which is like, now we're going to do what we want to do. We're not hurting anybody. Leave us the fuck alone. And I thought that was awesome. So I love that.
Well, maybe that's just the Latinos. And were they actually launching skyrockets and things like that?
Oh yeah, it looked like a full scale, like big time. I'll send you the video of it, Doug. It's
I've seen that, but aren't those kind of fireworks, like certainly M80s and cherry bombs and skyrockets, I presume, aren't they all illegal everywhere in the U.S. now?
No, only in certain states still. So usually people would cross the border and then they can buy them and bring them back. That's what, where I grew up, they were always illegal, but you could go to Missouri and get them. You could go to, I think, Minnesota and get them, something like that.
But are you talking, so you can get skyrockets and that type of thing?
Yeah.
That's great. But can you get cherry bombs?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yep. In certain states still can. Yep.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful.
But I'll send you that. So that's the spirit of the holiday, was certainly there in that, and I love it. So I'll send you that video. You will enjoy it. It literally, it was the best thing I'd seen in months, because this was in the summer of the, last year in the pandemic, everything was shut down. It was stupid. And it was wonderful to see.
But only the Mexicans would be anarchic enough to do that type of thing. Good law-abiding Americans wouldn't dream of it.
That's true. In fact, in my neighborhood, there's a little social networking app called Nextdoor. And basically you can only be on this app if they know where you live. So they actually send you mail and then you register. So then you're basically talking to just your neighbors. And the neighborhood that I was in, it was awful. Some people set off fireworks and the neighbors were furious, called the police on them, and we're attacking them. And they were, and ultimately I got in a debate with somebody and it got me banned from it. Got me completely banned from the neighborhood and from the social networking app. I moved out of the neighborhood, but anyway.
Sounds like every woman in the neighborhood was named Karen.
Yes, definitely that. And the funny thing is they said, well, we can't set off fireworks because think about all the veterans and their PTSD. And it's a nice neighborhood. I'm like, and I am a veteran, but I asked, are there any veterans here that have PTSD? Because if that's true, then I'm willing we should talk about that. If it really is affecting anybody. But of course there was nobody. I was the only person that had any military service at all there anyway. And of course I luckily didn't have to serve in any war. So I'm like, let's leave it to the veterans to the alone then.
Yeah, it's all about straw men to create hysteria, because in Uruguay, of course, they don't have 4th of July and they don't celebrate national independence of Uruguay or Argentina, for that matter, that I'm aware of. But they do celebrate Christmas and New Year's with fireworks. And I don't go there anymore, but I had a friend that he used to spend, I don't know, he had to spend $10,000 putting on fireworks in his backyard.
Yeah.
And he had like a 1 hectare plot where his house was on in downtown Punta del Este. But we're talking fireworks and all kinds of really wild and crazy stuff. And he was competing with his neighbors who were all doing the same thing.
Yes.
There would have been SWAT teams all over the place if that was in the US.
I know. I love it though. I love that. And I think there's something that Latinos generally love, like the big fireworks shows. I guess if they aren't shooting guns in the air, which they wouldn't do in Uruguay, but they certainly would in a lot of Latin America, the fireworks shows. All right.
Anyway, we got the 4th of July. It's probably going to be canceled anyway because it's a white man's holiday.
Yeah, we're just going to go with Juneteenth. I think that's the plan.
Right, exactly.
All right. So let's see. Let's get this question. This guy says, first, he wants to provide some context. He says, the president of Nicaragua is arresting political opposition. Justin Trudeau in Canada has passed Bill C-36 that explicitly states people can call the police if they so much as suspect a neighbor, friend, coworker, etc., might commit a hate crime under the new definition proposed in the bill. China has all but taken back Hong Kong, and I haven't seen the Dalai Lama mentioned for years. How would Doug explain this complacency, how this complacency has happened?
Yeah, of course, I'm shocked. Well, I'm shocked at what's going on, just generally speaking, although it's to be expected that the state would encourage neighbors to rat each other out on just doing something that's politically incorrect. But how do I explain it? I might have said, well, perhaps it's because so much of the population is on Prozac and Xanax, and there's literally 100 other psychiatric drugs like that just screw your mind up and turn you into a zombie. But that's mostly in the US, not other places. But that's perhaps a partial answer here in the US. What are the statistics? What do they say? There's 10, 20% of the population that's on that stuff all the time. I mean, it's the medical ads that they run. I'm not trying to go off topic here, but I just wanted to mention this before I forget. The medical ads that they run on television, I'd say about a quarter of all the ads on TV today are for drugs. And interestingly, all of them have the contraindications listed. And I'm just thinking, they ought to forget about listing all those things and just say, XYZ drug can definitely fuck you up. Ask your doctor if this shit is right for you. That's all they ought to say in exactly that language. And people might actually pay attention to it then. Anyway,
Yeah.
it was one reason. But I think the main reason is education.
Mm.
It's that people have been told for so long by authority figures in school and in ads and in their workplace that so it just becomes part and parcel of their psychological makeup after a while when you're told this stuff over and over and over again by authority figures.
Mm.
That's how I'd explain it. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Someone who's currently living in New York wants to know if you have any opinion about relocating to the Dallas, Texas area certainly compared to New York.
Well, Texas is one of the more free states in the US. So New York to Dallas would be a step in the right direction. Your tax bill is going to go down. There's a
Wow.
lot less regulation. The general ambiance is more pro freedom. Good move.
Yeah. Texan, and I haven't met a Texan, somebody who's born and raised there, that I didn't like, honestly. I always like Texans.
Yeah, me too. I feel the same way.
All right. So, what is the best skill for general success? Is it sales? He says adaptability. If you were to start over in Africa as a young adult, as you've talked about, and had no skills to begin with, what would be the first skill that you would want to acquire? Not while you're in Africa, but before you'd go. What's the skill?
Yeah. Best skill for general success. That is a great question. Um, I think it's the ability to deal successfully with people.
Mm.
There was a show on television, it ran about 5 or 6 years, starring Simon Baker, excellent actor, called The Mentalist. Did you ever see that?
I did. A great show.
Great show. And very well written, very cleverly written. And to have the abilities that Jane, that was his name, picked up, that's really all you need to get by in life, quite frankly. And you might ask, well, how did this character in The Mentalist pick up these abilities? And of course, abilities are different from skills. Maybe abilities are kind of innate, I mean, not everybody had the ability to do what Einstein did. Okay. But within that context, he grew up in a carnival with people that were always hustling and conning each other and so forth. I think there's something to be said for living in that environment for a period of time. In fact, I'd say that riding the rails for a year here in the US and living in missions and sleeping in St. Francis de Paul societies and things like that, that's a great way to pick up practical street skills, which is, I think, the most important thing, and becoming as close as you can to being your own version of the mentalist.
Mm. That's interesting, because I think the whole idea of street smarts isn't even something that people talk about anymore. They used to, this a decade ago, 2 decades ago, you'd hear people say, well, they might not be, they don't have a degree from some college, some great university, but street smarts, this person is great. And I think that's kind of, it seems like that's the category of things that you're talking about, like their ability to understand what's happening around them and to be resourceful in the environment with people.
Yeah, and to pick up street smarts, I actually think it helps to hang out with the lower orders of society who have to kind of live by their wits, even though their wits may not be that sharp, otherwise they wouldn't be among the lower orders, but still, there's something to be said for that. And have I done much of that? Not as much as I wish I had, frankly. I mean, the times when I've jumped into the deep end here in the US were the 2 times when I got on a freight train in Colorado, and one time I rode the train over 3 days and nights to Sacramento, California, and the second time to Portland, Oregon. And in those 2 3-day trips, I had more adventures and met more wild and crazy people than I would in an ordinary year of just hanging around, God forbid, Aspen, Colorado, which is where I was at the moment. So
Yeah, that's amazing. This is one. Tom Dyson is probably the modern model, I think, of somebody who's done this, who's really thrown himself deeply into this, and his whole family, in fact, thrown his whole family into the deep end with this for a long time. And um, I, I, you should just Google Tom Dyson and get on his. I don't know which. I can't remember what website you can find his stuff on, but he publishes there, and he's a remarkable human for sure. And he's got lots
Yeah,
of these stories.
yeah, he's British and very charming and disarming, and yeah, the stuff that he's doing with his family, running around the world and all that. He's a model in many ways. But okay, so supposing you've picked up these, and another thing I'd mention is sales. It's that when I learned to sell, um, and it is a real skill that it takes time to learn, um, I felt that it gave me more ability. It was more valuable than getting a PhD in psychology would, because it was practical and it was meaningful as opposed to academic and airy fairy. So I'd say a job as a salesman is the way to fly.
And when
Selling intangibles, well, tangibles, intangibles, either one. But I'd say that definitely part of everybody's education is learning to sell.
And people don't
And,
people don't know what that means though, Doug. People when people think of selling, they think of like a car salesman or something like that. But when you think of selling, how would you describe it?
well, that movie with Leo DiCaprio, The Wolf of Wall Street,
Mhm.
you see that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So he used a device in there. It's that, as I recall, the wolf takes a pen and hands it to somebody who wants to go to work for him. And he says, sell me this pen. And it was a test of how quickly the guy could think on his feet, how quickly he could analyze the good, strong points of this pen and why that person might want a pen and put it all together. So that's what being a practical psychologist is all about, finding out what you have to offer the other person and what the other person needs or thinks he needs.
Right, exactly. And I think that's the part that I think most people miss. I think people think of sales traditionally. They think, I have a product. My job is to get these people, to get them to buy it. And you could look at it that way, but that's the wrong way to look at it. It doesn't work very well. The better way of looking at it is, what is this person? How do I get in front of prospects, of people who have a certain set of needs that what I offer could actually help them legitimately solve a problem, legitimately make their life better, legitimately make them happier, whatever. Because then all you're doing is you're just you're helping people get what they want out of life. You're not trying to put something over on them. You're not trying to coerce them or manipulate them or, through clever technique get them to buy something they never wanted to buy, but instead you're actually just helping them get more of what they already want. And that the really successful salespeople, that's all they do. They're not, and that's why they're very careful about what product they'll sell, because they're like, I can't sell something that I can't, I can't think that I should have it. I don't think I could be a BMW car salesman because I like BMWs, because and I could say, this is what I like, and this is why I like it, and this is why I prefer this over a Mercedes and whatever, but,
Yeah,
but it's really important, I
it
think, to know
takes a
that.
certain amount, and of course, to be an effective salesman, you really have to have a lot of technical knowledge, or you should, about your product so you can compare it to other things and not be glib,
Right.
uh, and so forth.
Right.
Uh, Look, one interesting thing is Bibles. There used to be a lot of Bible salesmen in the US. And who could resist buying not just a little Bible, but a massive heirloom type of Bible, the type of thing where when there's a birth or a death in the family, you write it in the front of the Bible, and the government would take that as being adequate proof that the birth or death really occurred and stuff like that. And then there were encyclopedia salesmen that you weren't just trying to hustle somebody for some expensive books. you were selling all the knowledge of the world. You know, it's very entertaining going door to door and knocking on the doors. And I've done this, and the reactions that people have. And no, it's
Yep.
being a salesman is you're on your way to being a mentalist if you can be a successful salesman.
I agree 100%. No one wants to do it, but I think if there is a job where you could be a door-to-door salesman for a few months, you should take it. I mean, you should try. If you're a young person, you should definitely take it. It will scare you. It'll make you nervous. It will make you very uncomfortable. Even after you've done it 100 times, you'll still feel a little tinge of nervousness when you go up and knock on the door. I guarantee it. I've done it. I definitely know that's how it feels. However, then you imagine you take those skills that you learn and you get dropped into Africa. What you've really learned is you've learned how to assess the needs of someone else, how to engage them in conversation where they want to continue the conversation. And then, you know, to, when appropriate, direct that conversation to a mutually beneficial outcome. Like that is universally useful.
Exactly. And you don't know where things might lead from there. I mean, after you make a sale to somebody, maybe it turns out you really like each other and one thing can lead to another. So very definitely.
That's right.
And the question is what skill, what was it?
He says, what's the best skill for general success? And then, you know, if you're going to go to Africa, which one would you first try and pick up? Which skill?
It relates to what we've been talking about. And the answer, I think, is critical thinking, which is to say, analyze what is said or what is written or what is demonstrated. And critical thinking is the process of looking at it and determining what's true and what's not true, analyzing it, not just accepting it, but being a professional skeptic. That's what I think it's all about, critical thinking. And that allows you to see things that other people don't see. And by seeing things that other people don't see, because they're not critical thinkers, it's going to open up opportunities that they won't see either.
Yep. Good. I love it. Okay. Critical thinking in sales. So next question is, has Doug ever seen the movie Idiocracy? When it was released in 2000?
I've heard of that movie so many times. I've got to see it,
Yeah.
but I haven't. What do you think of it?
I think it's not, I didn't love it when I saw it, but I like the cultural reference points in it are really worth the exercise of watching it. Like, I didn't think it was that great. But I think that, I didn't think it was that great, but I thought it's shocking how accurate it probably is a prediction of our future. You know, it seems to be falling into place. I mean, Trump as president was like it was exactly like kind of fit because their president, I think I've told you, their president is like a professional wrestler. You know, it was like the world champion professional wrestler becomes president, and, you know, and he's just a showman. It's just a showman. And Trump was, you know, he did do some professional wrestling at a couple points. So I thought it was seemed very true at that point. But yeah, check it out. Check it out if you have time.
Well, you know, talking about professional wrestlers going into politics, you have that guy that Jesse Ventura was elected governor of Minnesota, quite a showman. And then, well, actually in our last novel, Assassin, one of the subplots of the novel is the guy that we have running for president. The vice president he selects is kind of a lookalike of Dwayne Johnson, The Rock.
Yep.
I think if Dwayne goes into politics, I think he's going to rise to the top.
I think so.
He's so charming. He's good looking. He's charming. He's smart. You know, doesn't have any bad habits.
Yep. Everyone likes him. Everyone likes him. He's definitely probably the most popular person in America, I would say, at least maybe a year or two ago. I don't know about right now, but certainly he was the most popular or most liked by everybody, most known by everybody. So, okay. Do you still think that Argentina, specifically Salta, is a good place to have a bolt hole, assuming it opens up soon?
Oh, wait a minute. One other thought. It's Idiocracy. I think Einstein was right. And he said that after hydrogen, the most common thing in the universe is stupidity. So kind of underlines the question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's okay.
What was that about Argentina?
Just want to know if you still think that Argentina, specifically Salta, is a good place to have a bolt hole, assuming it opens up soon.
Well, Salta, okay. It's a relatively backward province of Argentina. I mean, outside of Buenos Aires province, everything's kind of relatively backward. But Salta kind of looks like the Four Corners area. Most of it does. Colorado, Utah, that type of thing. So you'd like living there. Look, they don't speak English. They speak Spanish. That's a disadvantage. But at the same time, is it a good place to have a bolt hole? Well, I think it is. A lot of people that came down there, I guess mostly due to my efforts, really like it as a bolt hole. You got a neat, friendly, isolated little town where you can get basically everything you want. There's enough foreigners and tourists and sophisticated. Look, I had a friend from Aspen, and well, we're still friends. We've been friends for 25 years. So he was one of the very most successful real estate brokers in Aspen. He was making lots of money, and he's a very competent builder, general contractor as well. And I don't know, Kevin was worth 10 years ago, he was worth about 10 million bucks, which is not bad. He was doing okay. But then he lost it all through a odd set of circumstances. But so here he is, he's penniless. I mean, penniless. And he flies down to Cafajate because I told him about it. And he started out having to ride a bicycle around town because he didn't have any money. But now, he's doing very well. He's well on his way to becoming a multimillionaire again, even though he didn't speak Spanish. Well, he spoke Spanish, but not very good Spanish. He's married a local girl, and he's happy. So the answer to your question is, if Kevin can do it, he's a talented guy, good salesman, among other things. But yeah, anybody can do it. So the answer to your question is, specifically Salta, well, it's true of any place.
Yeah, I would say just my little experience with this. So Salta, Salta's a province, and then there's Salta City, and Doug did a property development about more than a decade ago. I think you started it in Cafajate, Argentina, and it's called La Estancia de Cafajate, and it's a beautiful place. And there are a lot of intelligent expats that are there, and it's Cafajate is this tiny little cute town that has some nice amenities, but it is backwards. It's in the very isolated, which is one of its advantages.
Yeah.
And I think the place personally,
I'd say it's like Taos, New Mexico, more than any other place, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of describing it. Yeah, and then maybe 2-hour drive from there, roughly, is Salta City, which is the biggest city in the Salta province, and it's a city. It's urban environment, but it's not like there's not skyscrapers or anything. It's all 3-story kind of stuff. I think, if I recall right. And I found the people there to be incredibly friendly and open to me, like there. And you don't find that everywhere you go, but certainly in Salta City, I found that, and I liked it quite a bit. So, as far as it's remote from the powers that be, in Buenos Aires and in Cafajate in particular, super remote. And then there's a lot of people who were fans of Doug and friends of Doug who ended up building second homes. So it could be worth looking into.
It's not a bad choice. That's why we chose it, actually, as a bolt hole. And of course, Argentina has its own set of problems, but it's always had problems. The whole world's got problems. So at this point, you almost can't find a place to run. And Shangri-La doesn't exist, I'm afraid.
Okay, so the next question says, you have both. Sorry, I'm hearing a little echo on myself. Let me. Next question is from both. I'd like to hear from both you and Matt, or Doug and Matt. You have both decided to set out as entrepreneurs versus growing wealth via working for others. Curious what drivers, circumstances led you down that path. Would you do it differently today? Where might some interesting opportunities be for new businesses going forward?
Well, in my case, it's that I've got to say, I've got an innate aversion to authority. I
You don't
mean,
say.
it's that it's not like I dislike, I just don't like people telling me what to do. That's all there is to it. So what do you, that means you got to work for yourself. Otherwise you've got a boss. And I don't like the idea of a boss.
Hmm. Hmm. I agree with that. However, you have had jobs. You had jobs early on in your career, and
Yeah,
those bosses you had were in many ways mentors to you. Like it wasn't right. They were helping.
that's true. I mean, yeah. Well, let me see. Jobs. What jobs did I have? Busboy, waiter. Okay, menial work. You'll learn a few things at that. Um, I worked in a scrapyard for a summer, sorting out metal and doing other stuff you do at a scrapyard. And I worked in a foundry, shoveling sand for 8 hours a day at night. So that's a great way to get in condition. What else did I do? I mean, look, I grew up in Blues Brothers country, partially, okay? And those are the kind of jobs you got during the summer. But
But you
geez,
had think about your sales jobs, though, right? I mean,
yeah, the sales jobs were interesting. They were interesting. You got to meet people and think and so forth. So I'm all for getting a job in the sales business
well, not
and learning the skill. I mean, it didn't take me long. It took me about 5 minutes to learn the skill of shoveling sand, or I worked in a catalyst cracking plant where my job was to take a 55-gallon drum, and when the buzzer went off, move the drum over here, put the lid on it, put another drum in, and push the button again so the cracking catalyst would start. Stupid jobs like that. I mean, forget about it. So
yeah,
yeah, you've got to be self-employed, frankly, or,
yeah.
or
I agree with you 100% on that. I do think that a lot of when I talk to a lot of young people who want to become, want to be entrepreneurs, I think mostly because they want the lifestyle, and they assume, the best way to be financially independent is to be an entrepreneur. And that's not true. It's not true at all. I don't think that the best way to become financially independent is as an entrepreneur. Most entrepreneurs fail. Most businesses fail. That's just a fact. And I think the ones who don't fail are ones who have acquired skills and knowledge for free first, without risking everything on it themselves. And you do that as an employee. And I think the thing is I think the thing is if you look at it, I don't want a boss, never wanted a boss. And but I don't feel like for the most part, I had a boss early in my career when I had jobs. I had people who um, I saw it as what gave me the opportunity to learn. So I was just, and in that,
that's a very good distinction. That's a very good distinction. You go to work for a place that it's in the guy that owns the shop's interest to kind of teach you the ropes so that you can, yeah,
yeah.
as opposed to a boss where you're just a robot.
Exactly. And I've done the robot jobs. I mean, I grew up in the same sort of Blues Brothers country you did. And so like detasseling corn, for instance, is one of probably my least favorite of those menial jobs I had. It was just because it was hard, nasty work. But anyway, but I would look for people.
That's not the same, but that's not the same as shucking corn, because I also grew up partially on a farm, and we used to have to shuck corn, and that was brain deadening work too. Machines do that today, but I guess we didn't have machines then.
Yeah. I don't know if the tasseling is still done manually or not. Actually, it seems crazy, but they'd be on the front of a combine. You'd stand on it. There'd be like a catwalk on front of it, and you'd be there with like, it'd go through like 7 or 8 rows of corn, and you'd be standing there, and the combine would just be going as fast as it could with people keeping up with it to be able to pull the tassels off. And man, I did it when I was 14 years old because it paid really well, so I'm like, I'm gonna it's the best job I could get, but it was so awful. And, but there were some people there that were really good at it, like older. I remember this one time, this older black guy next to me, and I'm like, I'm not keeping up. And so he just starts doing mine also, like in between, just like giving me a break. And I was like, I'm not sure I'm cut out for this detasseling, but did it for a summer. It was tough work.
I, 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 I know, because I worked on a farm too, and tossing 50-pound bales onto a truck, you pick them up. It's kind of brain dead work. A machine can do that. Although I've got to say, one advantage of working with at American Cyanamid, putting cracking catalyst into buckets, is that for roughly 40 minutes out of the hour, I could sit there and read a book until the little buzzer went off. So that wasn't a bad job from that point of view.
Yeah. So anyway, I think I just wouldn't say that entrepreneurship is the only answer, because I think you need skills and knowledge to really be a differentiated entrepreneur. And if you can find, and I think that we've gotten off track as an economy and culture by not valuing apprenticeship well. I think what's a huge, we talked with Rick about mentoring. A lot of the mentoring that he's done are people that are in his company that he wanted to bring their skills up. Was he their boss? Yes. But was he their teacher? Yes. And they were good students, and that's how the business, grew successfully. So you want to find those environments, because under those, you can actually move up way faster up the socioeconomic ladder than you can by starting off a business yourself. Because if you come from a background like I came from, you can't even imagine a business that would be, it'd be the basics. It'd be car washing, lawn mowing, house painting, like working class background. Those are the businesses you come up with. But you can get into something else and you can get way beyond that. So,
absolutely.
So the last question he asked about this was, what might some interesting opportunities for new businesses be going forward, in your opinion, Doug?
You've got me. What's a business that I would want to get into right now? Let me start out with the general answer. It's that in some ways, there are more opportunities than ever in the world, because the economy is bigger. There's so many different things, and technology is expanding. And there's always, that's on the one hand. But on the other hand, getting into business is more aggravation than it's ever been, with taxes and regulations and things of that nature. Frankly, look, to get into business, it takes certain skills. You have to be able to manage people, okay? I don't consider myself a manager of people. And I don't like running a business. It's just, I appreciate it, I respect it, so forth. I don't think I'm good at it. I'm not interested. I'd rather, do one aspect of it, the sales aspect. It's more fun, it's more entertaining for me. Yeah. But that's not answering the question directly. I can't think of a business that I'd recommend somebody get into today. I can't say plastics. Okay.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a good point. It's not, I think the business that someone should get in is highly dependent upon particular circumstances that they are in. Because you can't even pursue the ideal. You have to pursue what is actually feasible based upon the resources you have at the time, and the problems around you. But also, I think one thing is you want to avoid regulated spaces as much as possible, because it's almost impossible to innovate in a regulated space. So for instance, when we started Royalty Exchange, which is this, marketplace for music royalties, we could have gone a route where we tried to, where the business was based around securities, where we were actually working with securities. And unfortunately with that would come SEC regulations, FINRA regulations, and everything else. And we wouldn't have gotten past the legal part to ever be able to launch the business. So we did it in such a way that we could, that it didn't fall within any regulatory regime, either one of those anyway. We did it because we made them asset sales rather than security sales. And, so anyway, I think trying to focus on areas where there isn't existing regulations is the best way. All the innovation that's really happened in the last couple of decades has been in software, And because there isn't regulation around that. If you look at the big companies from Google to, Facebook, to whatever, these technology companies have all come in a space where the regulations just didn't exist because no one had thought of it before. And I think that the opportunities, if it requires innovation, you have to be in a space that's not regulated. I think that's one thing to consider. But as far as other businesses, yeah, I don't know. I think there are tons of opportunities out there, with more and more digital stuff, actually. But I think you have to you're better suited if you have a technical foundation, if you learn some basic software development, actually, to be able to even understand what the opportunities are around you. So, but there's a lot of opportunity in that area.
Yeah, those are good points. I think in today's world, perhaps something to do with bioengineering, which with CRISPR machines you can do in your garage the same way as Steve Jobs did 40 years ago with computers. I mean, it's analogous.
Yeah, and I think if you can, there's probably a part of that curve that is still outside of the regulated space.
Yeah, I think so. If you buy a CRISPR machine and learn the things that you need to know about that, the way, computer hackers did or do, I think that's a wide open field.
Okay. Well, certainly anything in longevity is a big space because people don't, there's a lot of people who want to live forever or want to live a lot longer in a higher functioning capacity. So certainly that anything that serves that market, I think, is going to do really well as well.
Yeah, everybody has to confront the fact that your body winds down, and nobody likes the idea. So that's a big area.
Doug, what do you think? Is monarchy preferable to democracy?
Yeah, well, there's an economist named Hans Hermann Hoppe that is, he's kind of a cold type of guy, not easy to get to know. So I can't say he's a friend of mine, but I guess we're friendly. And that's an idea he's promoting very much. And he wrote a book, which I've read, called Democracy, the God That Failed. I believe I have that title right or close to it. Hoppe spelled Hoppe. He's a German. And in it, he makes the case for monarchy or things of that nature, kind of one-man rule, principalities, dukedoms, things of that nature as being a better way of organizing government than democracy. I completely agree with them. I mean, all kinds of problems with that, but democracy, this ridiculous meme of, it was Winston Churchill's famous for saying this, democracy is the worst kind of government there is, except for all the others. Well, that's just not true. That's bullshit. I mean, and since Churchill said it, everybody repeats it without critically analyzing, well, is that true? And I'd say, no, it's not true. Democracy is mob rule.
And Churchill actually believed it. Actually, I can't imagine he would actually believe it.
No. Churchill's such a double-edged sword in so many ways. I don't know what to think about Churchill, except that he would have been a lot of fun to hang around with.
Sure.
I mean, that's for sure. But other things, I don't know. So, yeah, I'd say the basic, to summarize very, very succinctly, what I think Hoppe is saying is that if a prince basically owns the country, it's his, except you can have a house or whatever, but he's running the show. He's got an interest, a personal interest in making things run right because he doesn't want his asset to be dissipated. Okay, that's a good argument. And if people will bring up counter arguments like, well, what about these Roman Empire emperors, Caligula, and Nero, and horrible guys who, yeah, that's right. That's the problem with the political system. So actually, it's the wrong question. Is a kingdom better than a democracy? It's the wrong question to ask. The question is is government of any form necessary? That would be a critical thinking answer to that question. And my answer in that context would be no, it's not. That's why I believe in files as a way that people will organize themselves and kind of keep each other under control and, you know, weed out bad actors and stuff the government's supposed to do, basically.
Right.
Files. Well, we've talked about that in the past. So
We have. Yeah. The thing that I like about the monarchy idea at least is that you can know who the problem is.
that's right. That's
you know,
right.
if like the people are starving, like there's someone to blame for it, you know, because of decisions that have been made or whatever. Whereas in a democracy, you know, it's kind of like your description of the euro compared to the dollar. It's like, you know, nobody, or you say for the dollar, it's like
I owe you nothing.
right. And for
Who owes you nothing? That's right.
Right.
Nobody's to blame. Right. Hey,
Right.
it's democracy. We're all to blame.
Exactly.
Which is bullshit.
Exactly. So that's the biggest thing I think. But you can't identify a problem in a democracy because, you know, it's held up like it's almost like a religious icon in a way, you know.
Yeah.
So, okay. Let's see. I don't know if you watched House of Cards. Did you watch that show? Someone else.
I loved it. I loved it. I thought it was super realistic.
So he says, if Frank Underwood, the infamous character from the Netflix series The House of Cards, were real, how successful would he be in today's US politics? Is there currently any politician that comes close to Frank's cunning skills at manipulation, deception, and crafty beguilement?
I think he'd be super successful, just like he was in the series. And I think people that are in Washington, whether they know it or not, are basically like him. Yeah. And who's closest to it today? I got to say Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
In fact, I wouldn't doubt that he was modeled on Bill and Hillary.
I wouldn't doubt it either. I know that the people involved in it know each other.
Yeah.
Yep. So
and Barack and Michelle, I mean, they would be also good templates.
yeah, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about them, but you're right. They actually seem to follow that as well. Okay, let's see. What's your view on the precious metal platinum? It used to be more expensive than gold until relatively recently. It can be sold. It can also be purchased as a precious metal coin, like a maple leaf. And interesting enough, those coins have been sold out for almost a year at the Vancouver Bullion and Currency Exchange.
I'm ambivalent about platinum. I mean, it's a high-tech metal. It's, you know, it's very dense and has a lot of the shares, you know, it's shares many of the characteristics of gold. In fact, but at one point in the past, you know that in Russia, that platinum was used to counterfeit gold coins. They'd use platinum because it has many of the characteristics of gold, weight-wise and specific gravity-wise. And so platinum was used as a phony way of,
it's amazing,
just gold-plated and that. So I don't know what platinum should be worth. It's mainly used as a catalyst in today's world. And if as electric cars come to the fore, and I think they will for a number of reasons we could talk about why electric cars are actually superior to internal combustion engine cars. Well, that's a major use of platinum that's going to go away. So, but then again, is that important? Because remember, photography, silver used to be, its main use was in photography. Well, people don't use it there anymore. And it's still, look, the reason I don't think platinum has the facility of gold, or for that matter, silver, is something you should collect or store, is that most people, here's a fun fact. It's that every metal in its pure metallic form, okay, they all look silver or steel or kind of like that. They all look like silver, kind of, except for copper and gold. Those are the only two metals in their raw, pure metallic form that are different, that look different. So if I was going to take one of these raw, one of these pure metals, I mean, rhodium, iridium, and all that, they all look like silver. Just buy silver. It's got a good enough argument. So.
Okay. Good. Let's see. Next question. As a foreigner living in Russia with my family, he's planning to move out of Moscow to the suburbs. He says, I call it hiding in the lion's den. I'll grow my own food for a few years till this genocide is over, he says. Is it a good plan to stay, or should I move to another country?
Yeah, I've thought about this. Russia, is that a place that you can think of? A lot of South Africans, incidentally, are pulling up stakes and moving to Eastern Europe, including Russia at this point. Well, they're farmers, okay, the guys that are doing that. Okay, I can see the argument. Russia's got some advantages. I think the maximum income tax is 10%, but I don't know. Look, the problem with Russia is that I've described it as a gas station with an attached gun store in the middle of a wheat field. And once you get out of Moscow and Leningrad, I mean, it's primitive. It's primitive. I mean, out in the country, it's primitive. And it's just a giant, empty, primitive country where people have picked up a lot of bad habits over the years. And look, you can make it absolutely anywhere. It's important to learn the language in these places. So linguistic skills, I think, are important, quite frankly.
I agree. My guess is he has family from there that's there, and his English or his Russian is probably, passable. Is my guess from this guy's question. But I think the point is you're making is that you can make it. You can really make it anywhere. But the question is, where do you want to? You have to pick not just a place where you can survive, but you want to be in a place where you can actually live, where you can have a quality of life that is worth having, right? So, and a lot of that for you, I know, and certainly it's for me too, is the intellectual stimulation of being around people that are interesting. I mean, the people that, and without that, then things, even if you have food, I don't know, it's not as interesting to me anyway.
No, not really. And of course, it's not as on level a playing field as you'd find in Africa. In Africa, you go to Africa, it's a really on level playing field, tilted in your favor. In Russia, not so much, because among other things, because they still think the Amerikanskis might be enemies, and you're just another white guy, but you're from the U.S. and the Russians are pretty well educated. Generally, everybody's pretty well educated. Not good values in most cases. There's probably better choices than Russia, is my thought.
Okay.
But I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, if I'd been able to talk my wife into it, frankly, also if I was 10 or 20 years younger, I would have talked her into going to live in Moscow for a year. And that would have been interesting because, the way things work is get to know some oligarchs and get to know more oligarchs, and opportunities show up. It could be interesting, but you don't want to hang out with the average Russian. You want to hang out with the oligarchs or the guys that are on their way to becoming oligarchs. And the other place I would have gone would have been Kinshasa, but that was just way too off the deep end for her.
I don't blame her. All right. So someone says, why did you decide to move to Virginia? Also, what do you think about moving to Puerto Rico for tax benefits?
Yeah, well, why did I come back to Virginia? Because I grew up in this area, quite frankly. And, maybe I feel like a salmon swimming upstream or something like that. I don't know. But I like this part of the country, and I wanted to have a crib in the US, even though that's looking less and less like a good idea. But still, I mean, I can afford it. And I just like the area. It's arbitrary. That's all it is. Puerto Rico, thought about Puerto Rico. Not a bad idea. I mean, you can set it up so that you're investment returns are basically 100% tax-free. And you're, depending on what business you get into, your business returns. So it's a great way to live tax-free and, still get Amazon deliveries, just like you're really in the US. So it's not a bad choice. But the thing is that most of the people that I know that live in Puerto Rico or that went there for that reason. I'm not sure if I'd have to find other people to associate with.
Yeah, I think that's I've looked at Puerto Rico a lot. It's not for me for a lot of reasons. I definitely think first of all, Puerto Rico, I think is going to be the 52nd state probably,
Yeah.
in which case all of those tax contracts will be null and void. They will all go away. So it's a temporary thing, but temporarily you could still make a lot of money if you have huge, windfall gains you want to cash in on. But also, it's just most people who live there live in overpriced homes that are in these enclaves, in these gated communities. And on the outside of those communities are basically the people who did not feel ambitious enough to leave the island to go pursue opportunities in the US, or people who work for the government there. And I just think that it's not like the social dynamics are not good. You have all these, billionaire hedge fund managers that live in this neighborhood, and there's a little gate and a Puerto Rican guard stop post. And then you have basically an impoverished island other than that. And I just doesn't seem like feels like it'd be trapped. That'd be my worry.
Yeah. I mean, if you can set it up so that you're going to have a giant capital gain and you can shelter some of it for taxes, okay, may not be bad duty for a couple of years. But in general, in West Side Story, where, the Jets and the Sharks, gangs in New York. So Maria, who's kind of the female hero, she plays Juliet in that movie too. She said her friend, I forget what her friend's name is, Puerto Rico, my heart's devotion, let it slip back into the ocean. I mean, she hated Puerto Rico. That's why she went to the slums of New York.
Wow, I forgot about that. Let's see. What does Doug think of the LGBTQPQRSTU? I think is what you once said. Specifically, people contradicting biology with the terms they use for comfort, i.e., biological male is identifying as a he, her, or she. If I call my left hand my right hand, is my left hand still my left hand, or is it not actually my right hand? That sort of thing. He says, does it feel like intelligence and rationality is going backwards for humans with all of this?
Yeah, well, those are really kind of two questions. First, all of this stuff with, gay and trans and, all these different, they're all sexual aberrations. What we're dealing with here are people that have severe psychological aberrations manifesting in a sexual manner. Now, personally, I don't care, if somebody is goofy or crazy or aberrated, as long as they don't hurt me or cause me any damage. So I don't care if a gay couple moves in next door. In fact, I'd welcome them because they probably are, clean and have lots of virtues. They cook well. It'd be great to have dinner with them. But what they do is they integrate their aberrations to government and have them codified into laws, which tells they're elevating the fact that they're mildly crazy, sometimes more than mildly crazy, into it's a sign of the continuing collapse of civilization, frankly, in the West. And the Chinese and the Russians and everybody in the world thinks that Americans in particular, but Europeans also, they all think we're weak and crazy. And they're right for elevating these things from, just neuroses and aberrations up to enshrining them as things that are to be striven towards and showing them as the new normal. It's not normal. So that's my view. And what was the second part of that?
Just about, do you feel like intelligence and rationality are going backwards for us as humans?
Yes, they are. And it happens. I mean, civilizations actually do collapse. I mean, the first wholesale collapse of civilization we know of was the Bronze Age collapse, which happened quickly, we think, around the 1200 BC, where all over the Eastern Mediterranean, everything just fell apart. And it was a dark age for like 500 years in the Eastern Mediterranean. And then the Greeks came back, started to come back about 700, 600 BC. That was the first one. And then the second one was, starting in the 300s and the 400s, when Rome collapsed. And it really was a dark age. So can we have another dark age because people are becoming irrational and acting unproductively? Yeah, sure, it's possible.
One of the things that's interesting about all that to me is that you have this these civilizations, they have a lot of technology, and it's like the stack of the thing I worry about today is the stack of technology that we use, from how we build stuff, how our electrical grid operates, how a car runs, those things, that stack of technology. In all of these major civilizations, they had this stack of technology that basically allowed them to, allowed free time for people, or allowed people to explore new ideas and innovate and create. And at some point, we talked about like the Roman aqueducts at one point, that like no one knew how they worked, no one knew how they operated, like everyone who had, and so they just kind of fell into disuse and disrepair, just like many of the things that the Romans built, and they couldn't reproduce that technology for another 1,000 years. And those are my worries, I guess, about like that now with our civilization, is that nobody knows anything about the tech stack that we've got. Really, there's just a handful of people, and it'd be so easy for it to completely fall apart, it seems.
It's so much more complex than it was in previous civilizational collapses. Incidentally, I just got this morning. You do a personal blog, and the one you sent this morning was on exactly the subject.
Yeah, on the power grid, is on the blackouts. Yeah, and it's just, we're just killing ourselves. It's like we're committing Harry Carey almost by basically taking these power plants that are incredibly productive, these nuclear plants, essentially taking them offline completely and without a replacement for them. And, and it's going to kill us. I mean, people will die.
Well, the replacement for them is actually solar power panels, which were all made in China. So maybe nobody knows how to really make them or has the facilities to make them easily here in the US, which makes it doubly stupid, actually.
Exactly. Yeah, it's scary. Anyway, but yeah. Let's see. So next question, Doug, is in a world of socialism, how does an individual prosper?
In a world of socialism, there's only really, well, if you're really an expert and you're really competent at something and you're really necessary, yeah, you'll prosper in any kind of society, even the worst, most horrible socialist society. But barring that, it's to become wired with the authorities and play politics. That's how you become successful in a socialist society. It's all about politics, backslapping and backstabbing and schmoozing. That's what it all is. It's not about producing things or creating value. So that's the answer. I think that's the answer. What do you think?
If that is the answer, I just want to opt out.
For sure. Yeah. And yeah, include me out. Absolutely. That's degrading and disgusting. I watched, somebody has just produced a cartoon kind of movie, where not actors, just cartoons, of Ayn Rand's book, Anthem, which dealt with exactly that. So that would be a good thing to watch when it's available. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I'll check it out. Okay, Doug, do you have any ethical rules for investing in publicly traded company lines the pockets of those who are firmly committed to a fascist system, and adding capital to that system gives fascists greater power? In John McAfee's last interview, he said, quote, investing itself as an idea, as a paradigm, is the most horrific of all fucking inventions of the human psyche.
I've got to listen to that interview. because I don't know if that was really his belief or not, or if he was just in a
Move.
dark humor. I just don't know. Have to listen to the interview. But what do I do personally? Of course, I despise all the politically correct memes floating around in the investment world today. Like, what is it? GSC, government,
Yes.
what,
ESG.
ESG, right. I mean, this is stupid and despicable and morally incorrect. It's just, I, look, but I just made a very large investment, frankly, more than seven figures in Marin Katusa's new promotion company. It's a real company called Carbon Streaming. Do I agree with anything that the company does, which is basically buying and selling and creating carbon credits, which is total bullshit. Total bullshit. I don't believe in any of it. But on the other hand, when it comes to investing, I'm a believer in the French saying, sauve qui peut. Let he who can save himself. And, you know, making the trend my friend. And at some point, I'll drop it like a hot potato. And so the answer to the question is, no, I'm not going to finance some would-be entrepreneur that wants to save the world by saving the birds and the bunnies. No, I'm not going to do that. But if I can get into a publicly traded company and make a score on something that's stupid and counterproductive, yeah, of course I will. That's what a speculator does.
Yeah. And one of the things is that, and this is not being ideological about your investments is really important, because you really cannot succeed if you're coming at it from an ideological perspective. And I think this is where people get in trouble with gold, is where they get in trouble with Bitcoin.
Yep.
And
that's right. I mean, look, making a political statement is one thing, but making a political statement where you can lose a lot of money, that's something else.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Anytime it's an ideological thing, you know, the critical thinking mechanism has been set aside for a moment. And that's always
that's right. That's absolutely right.
Okay. So next question is, how do we get Doug elected president of Argentina? Or is it even worth trying to influence outcomes to be in our favor in a country with a small government?
Yeah, well, maybe that's a reference to the fact that my hobby for many years has been trying to subtly and peaceably take over a country. But I wouldn't want to be the president. And of course, in order to be the president of a country, you've really got to be a native of the country. But it's impossible, especially in Argentina, because the deep state there is so entrenched that, as Mauricio Macri, who was the president for the last 4 years, proved, you just can't move them. They will stop you in any of 100 ways. Well, if Ron Paul had been elected through some weird fluke to be president of the US, I mean, the first thing that would have happened was he would have had a sit down with the Praetorians in these agencies and top congressmen and generals, and they would have told him how it works. And they'll kill you, frankly. I mean, these people they're much more dangerous than Frank, what's his name, from House of Cards.
Yeah.
So I don't really see any hope until the present situation collapses. There's no magic that can be worked by a guy getting into office. The closest that anybody's come in recent years that I can think of is Augusto Pinochet in Chile. He got rid of Allende, good move, and he turned that place from a backward, nothing, nowhere mining province into the most advanced and prosperous country in Latin America. And what did he get for it? He was, turned into a world-class criminal, the next Hitler, on and on. So,
and he only bought Chile how long? How many decades? Because they're, right now they're rewriting their constitution, right? They're falling back into their old habits.
Yeah, that's right. They've got elect a communist as president, and it's it's pretty hopeless, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think this whole idea of nation state government is, I think when we can start thinking outside of that context, more around this file concept that you've talked about a lot, then I think that's where the opportunity is. But we're stuck in our nation state thinking ourselves even.
Right. Like, I respect the question, and it's a very flattering question that somebody asked, but it's the wrong question, because it's thinking within the current paradigm, and the current paradigm, I don't see a solution for it.
Hmm.
So,
Unfortunately, yes, I agree. Okay, related to this, you talked about citizenship. What does Doug think about the U.S.'s practice of allowing dual citizens of other countries to hold high office within the federal government?
if the federal government only did what it's supposed to do, which is protect the people in its bailiwick from foreign invasion, and have a police force to protect you from common law crimes within, and have a court system to allow you to adjudicate disputes without resorting to violence, it would make no difference at all, because these are necessary functions. Although I'd say those three functions are too important to be left to the kind of people that wind up in government.
Right.
So once again, appreciate the question, but got to rephrase your thinking, because that's
Yeah.
not going to solve anything.
Right. I think the idea is that there's, if you're a citizen of two countries, you have dual loyalties to multiple countries. But I don't think that our elected leaders have loyalty to our country as
No,
it. One citizen for that.
I think what he's actually asking there is, there are a lot of high government officials. Well, one that I can think of was Rahm Emanuel, that are dual American Israeli citizens. And I think since I know a lot of Zionist Jews, they really do have dual loyalties. It's understandable. I mean, I don't hold that against them. I mean, but the government shouldn't be able to do anything to help or hurt Israel. It's just another country out there. If you like it, you hate it, that's your business. But
Yeah,
that's what the question was really about, I suspect.
I think so too. Okay. What would be the appropriate response if a SWAT of FEMA camp agents and nurses presented to my door mandating a forced COVID-19 experimental jab? He says, I live in Europe and the general population is disarmed, but not me.
Oh, that's very dangerous. You
Right.
can't confront the state violently. It won't end well. It's the one thing that they can do reasonably well, is inflict violence on individual citizens. So forget about it. Just make yourself scarce when they arrive. That's all you can do, I think.
I think so too. And I think you got to I think, there's somebody refers to Solzhenitsyn in some of these questions, and Solzhenitsyn talked about the idea that he was complaining if some of us would have fought back when they came for people in the middle of the night, that we would have been like, there was a point where we could have turned the tide, but everybody has hid away and that kind of thing. And that implies that you should fight back. But I think that the bigger thing would have been if you is seeing what's coming, and when you have the option to leave that place and go to somewhere where that kind of outcome can be avoided altogether, where you don't have to participate in it, is the right move. It's not to put yourself in a position of grave danger where there must be conflict. I mean, you really do want to avoid that conflict. Like you're not going to win, and it's not going to change anything, and your life would be lost pointlessly, I think. My
Yeah, I agree completely, Matt. It's sad but true. And yeah, if you were sure that everybody or most of the people in your city would do the same thing as you would, okay, maybe it's worth a shot. But even then, you're just in one city and they control the whole country and they control the army. And, you can't fight the tide of history. You'll just get washed away. And as we were talking about earlier, most of your neighbors wouldn't agree with you. They think that the police that are are the good guys rounding you up. So
that's right. Okay, next question. In Paul Rosenberg's letter a few days ago, and I actually haven't read his most recent letter, but he mentioned that libertarians weren't as successful as they could be because they didn't take risks like the advocates of Bitcoin do. How accurate do you find Paul's assertion?
Do libertarians really take risks or not? I don't know if that's terribly accurate. I agree with Paul on just about everything, as I know you do too. And I think look, Bitcoin's the best thing that ever happened to libertarians because most of them were poor as church mice and some of them made a giant amount of money because of that. So bravo for Bitcoin. But the fact of the matter is that libertarians tend to be aesthetes. They tend to be intellectuals. And most of them can talk the talk about money, but they don't walk the walk. They don't have any money.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's risk taking so much because I have to read Paul's article on this to understand what he's maybe the details of what he's saying. But I think that a lot of the advocates of Bitcoin take zero risk. Like they bought it when it was a lot less expensive, and they talk about it a lot. They talk about it as it's the future. They're basically this is where people like Nassim Taleb that calls it basically a Ponzi scheme. He calls Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme. Where that has some validity, and that is that like I talk about it more, I try and sell it, and then people buy it, and then they talk about it more, and then the price goes up, and and if there might be some other risks that people are taking that I don't understand, but for the most part, they're just people who have participated in a remarkably profitable speculation, and I don't think that they're really taking risks.
Yeah, I agree. It's different from taking risks.
Starting a business, I mean, building a business, that's different. Yeah. Owning Bitcoin is not the same as building a business. I don't know. So, all right. Just a couple more here, Doug. What's your opinion on different vaccines for things like hepatitis A or B for traveling? It says, I'm relocating from Canada to Mexico soon and am so overwhelmed at everything vaccine related that I have no idea.
Well, I'll give you my view on it. It's that I'm not anti-vaccines. I mean, Edward Jenner showed how to cure smallpox 200 years ago. So yeah, there's a real value to many, many vaccines. I'm not anti-vaccine, but I'm anti the hysteria that surrounds this COVID-19 thing. And this is a different kind of vaccine as far as I can tell. And it hasn't been tested, it's experimental. So I'm not interested in taking it, period.
Yeah. Just for other things, like he says, hepatitis A and B for traveling. He says, but I think it's probably, my guess is the State Department often has recommendations about being in certain countries and what you should do, and I think that my experience is that they're overly conservative, making it seem as though it's really dangerous in another place, and that you have to be like that the vaccines really matter. But I don't know. What's your view on that? State Department's recommendations?
Look, I think they're overrated. Like going to malarial zones. I mean, I don't like to take any drugs, quite frankly, because it's like the warning that should be attached to all drugs. XYZ can definitely fuck you up. Ask your doctor if this shit is right for you. That's all they have to say. Maybe that make people think twice instead of giving this long thing. So generally speaking, try to stay away from medical drugs for just the reasons I just stated.
Okay.
Generally.
So someone asked here about, I think they're looking at commodities trading stuff, and I'm not sure I understand the question completely, but he says, how do you determine the amount produced versus the amount sold from publicly available data? Is this in the Commitment of Traders report? Oh, she's talking about gold and silver.
I don't follow that very, very much, quite frankly. Yeah. Look, your best indicator is not reported Commitment of Traders reports. I think it's going to a newsstand and looking at what's on the front cover of magazines to kind of get an idea of what's on the public's mind, which is what the people that put the covers of magazines together, they put the cover there because it's going to get people's attention. It's what they're interested in. Of course, trouble is magazines are going the way of the dinosaur at this point. So that's the way I feel about it.
All right. Last question here. And I know the answer to this already, but are you able to talk to Ross Ulbricht on the show?
Uh, well, as you're aware, he's in a maximum security federal pen at this time. And I listened to a half-hour call that he made. His mother, who I'm a friend of, sent it to me. And every 10 minutes, something like that, there was a recorded voice that came on. This call is coming from a federal prison, be on alert, or something like that. And I suppose Ross could, in another call, could have it recorded and disseminated, but would it be to his best interest? Because if he said anything that was really interesting, it might go against him in the prison. I mean, they might put him in the hole. Who the hell knows what these people might do? So I'm not sure it would serve much useful purpose. You
Right.
think it couldn't get any worse than 2 times life plus 40 years? But yeah, they can make it worse.
They could definitely make it worse. They could definitely make it worse on him. I mean, you also you don't want to give somebody a reason. Maybe, the next president or a couple down the line, maybe someone will pardon him eventually. You just don't want anything. You don't want to make anything worse for him. I think that's definitely a good point.
Basically, yeah.
Okay. All right, good. So I think that's really all we've got for today, Doug. I appreciate it. And I hope you enjoy your 4th of July weekend. And
I'm great. I think I'm a bit of a cultural traditionalist, so I'm going to have, we're going to have hot dogs and hamburgers. I think that's what you do.
As one should. Exactly. And are you getting together with others, or is it just you and Ancha? What's the plan?
Well, and John Hunt, my co-author on the novels, and his significant other. So there's just going to be the 4 of us. And in this small, kind of exclusive little area where we are, he's met the neighbors. He's reached out to them. He says they're okay, but I'm not anxious to socialize with them at the present time.
No, but John has a lot of fun, so it'll be good to have him.
Yeah, John's a very, smiling, happy, outgoing kind of guy. He gets along with everybody, which I can't say about myself. So why should I take a chance on making enemies with the neighbors? Better than I just kind of be, well, there's somebody else lives over here. Who knows?
Yeah.
Other than somebody that they're suspicious of after they meet me.
And if you talk too much, they would be.
Yeah. So what am I going to do? Just zip my mouth and not say anything? It's talk about the weather and the state of the roads. That's no fun. So no, I guess not.
Okay. All right. Well, have fun. Enjoy your burgers and hot dogs, and we'll talk to you next week.
You too, Matt. Oh, I didn't have a chance to ask you what you were going to do tomorrow.